Hi everyone, I'm Liz Eggleston and I run Course Report, which is a resource for choosing the right coding bootcamp for you. And today I'm joined by Katie, who took the UX bootcamp at DevMountain, and she graduated a few months ago. And she's joining us today. Thanks so much for being here, Katie.
Hi, glad to be here.
So we get questions all the time about what you'll actually be able to build during a bootcamp, because I think a lot of boot campers start with resources online. Maybe they're building a clone of an existing app or just tweaking code, but they're curious about how far they can actually get during a boot camp, and if they'll be able to actually build something original to include in their portfolio and show their employers. And at DevMountain, the UX students, like Katie, actually work with students in other tracks, like the web development track, on their final project. So Katie, I have a feeling that your final project is going to be pretty cool, and I'm really excited for you to share it. But before we actually look at your project, I'm curious about what you were up to before you did DevMountain. Can you tell us like your pre-bootcamp story?
Yeah, of course. So I have a background in art. I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Utah in art teaching. Really loved getting my degree, but was kind of a little bit lost after college. Not really sure what I wanted to do and kind of what career path I should take. I played around a little bit in like retail management. Decided I didn't want to work in retail forever, so made the transition into kind of like a project coordinator role for an HR-based company doing physical products out in Salt Lake City, and it was a great job. I loved it. But when I started looking at kind of like where my like growth opportunities would be, it was really limited in the physical product space. And so I started looking at what skills I might need to add to my own like little skill piggy bank, and what I might need to build and grow to make myself really like a competitive candidate in the job market, and find something that I would be passionate again about and could help me be more creative, go back to kind of the art side a little bit, but take that management, that project coordinator kind of spot, and found UX. I had a couple friends that were doing it and did a lot of research online, and really decided that it could be a great spot for me. I was familiar with some of the tools already from college, like the Adobe suite. So I kind of felt like maybe I had a little bit of a leg up and it would be something that I could fall into. And yeah, did a lot of research and made the jump to DevMountain to help me get the skills I needed.
Did you research any other UX boot camps, or did you kind of have your heart set on DevMountain from the get-go? Can you tell us a little bit about your research process?
Yeah, of course. I did a lot of research on the right boot camp for me. Yeah, it was a really big toss-up between like, I know there's a lot of online only boot camps, and I thought, oh, maybe like that's something that could be for me, but really I thrive better in in-person situations, and I wanted to be with people that were also passionate and be able to learn from people on a one-on-one like human interaction. I do better when I work with people in person, and I knew that that was something that I wanted, and so that helped me kind of start narrowing down my choices. And then I was looking at really what was the best choice for me based on where I lived, and the timing of boot camps. And DevMountain was right in line with where I wanted to be, getting my knowledge, right? I went to the downtown Salt Lake location, and that was really convenient for me. It worked out great. It was the kind of situation that I wanted to be learning in. And then when I kind of did some research about the people that were coming out of the program and people that were leading it, they seemed to be the people that I wanted to spend time around. And that was something that was really important to me, was making sure I had the right fit, the right community to help nurture my learning and really get me on the fast track to making that pivot.
Cool. So you had a hold on like the Adobe suite, those types of skills, those like kind of graphic design skills. What were the skills that you needed to add on to that in order to be a UX designer? I feel like there are a lot of people who come from an art background or a graphic design background and are curious like what else they need to know in order to do a more technical role like UX design.
Yeah, I think that is a great question. I wasn't sure at first. I just knew that I needed some sort of background training. And really, I would say that probably the top thing would be developing that empathy for users and that focus on usability. That's not something that is as prominent in the art world, or it can be a little bit there in graphic design, but I don't think it's the main focus. And really, to be a successful UX designer, you have to think about the user, right? It's user experience. So developing that empathy, learning to write user stories, user journey mapping, all those kinds of skill sets, and then translating those skills from more of a physical place to a digital place. There are, like, some designs work really well in real life and printed and on the wall, but then that is not the same when you translate it to being on a small device on your phone. So some of the principles are similar, but some principles are very different. And learning what those differences are and what makes things work in the different spaces was really critical for me.
Okay, cool. Thank you for outlining those. And then once you found DevMountain, I'm curious if it was easy to get in. Was it difficult to get accepted? Did you have to do like a UX challenge or prove that you knew something about UX before you got in, or could you be a complete beginner and apply to DevMountain without any experience?
I did have to do a UX challenge, but I don't think that you need to have any experience to be successful at the UX challenge to get in. So, and I will admit, like, I was a little bit nervous about like applying to get in, but as I was doing the research, not every program had that as a requirement. Like I was accepted to other programs before I did the DevMountain challenge, and actually like have a lot of respect that they do a challenge. I think that shows that they're looking for people that are really passionate about doing this, and it's not like something they're just, doing on a whim. It's something that people are really dedicated to, and have some sort of idea about, maybe like they've maybe done some research on what UX is, so they maybe have at least a little bit of a grasp of something.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I needed any of like my previous training to be successful in the challenge, and really it was just thinking through an idea and showing some ideas based on this problem that you were given, and it didn't need to be perfect, and mine definitely wasn't, but they were looking for people to put in the effort and put in the work, and I think that helps DevMountain stand out, that the students there put in the work to be there.
And then once you got to DevMountain and kind of started and met your classmates, like, was everybody coming from a similar background as you? Did everyone have kind of an art background, or were people coming from completely different industries? Like, who else was in your class?
It was a real mix. Like, there were a few people that also had like graphic design backgrounds, and they realized that they needed to build on their skill set. But we had someone that was coming from landscape architecture. Like, that's totally different. And we had someone who was a business student at a local university, or someone that had studied psychology. There was a kid in our class that worked at Target part-time, like hadn't done any previous college. And so it was, yeah, just a real mix of people just looking to develop themselves and grow each other. And I think that also, yeah, helped us all benefit. That diversity was great.
Cool. That's awesome. And you had done an MFA before, you'd done the kind of traditional education experience. So what was the learning experience like at DevMountain? Maybe you can tell us about like a typical day and who your instructors were, but also just like what it was like to actually learn in a boot camp style environment.
we had a really good mix of like lecture time and actual like creative time. So being in a classroom all day, it didn't feel like super lengthy, or we weren't sitting in lectures for long periods of time. Usually the typical day we would start out with like a small creative exercise in the morning, kind of get us going. It usually lasted about like 30, 45 minutes. We would, get our brains kind of going, kind of working in the morning. And then after that, we would spend some time on a lecture, maybe do a couple exercises inside that lecture to practice whatever we were talking about that day. And then break for lunch. After lunch, come back and usually do some sort of lab exercise having to do with the lecture, really getting some practice, some hands-on, whether that was like card sorting with the other students, or like going outside and actually like interviewing people on the street, or just sketching something for first time, or learning some of the more technical skills on our computers. We would, spend some time drafting in Sketch, tackle different problems. And then usually after that, we would have time to either work on a project or work on something independently.
Cool. And so we're talking about your project today. So could you kind of talk through, because I think this is kind of unique. I don't hear about this a ton, about like students in different tracks, like web development, the web development track working with the UX track on projects. When did you get to do that? And what was what capacity did you work with students from other tracks at DevMountain?
Yeah, so for our first project, we worked like just with other people in the UX course. And that probably lasted through the first like month and a half. And then in our second month, we got, partnered up with one other person or two other people from the UX course, and then a couple of people from the developer course. And we had a full day where we all worked together in a team doing like a really, really quick project together, just one day, kind of flush something out. We were all like given the same prompt, and it was kind of to see like how we would choose our order of what project we got to work on. So like the winners of that project that we spent all day on like got first pick of the problem that they were gonna build some sort of solution for, and then it like kind of went out from there. So that kind of actually got us like really quick getting to know each other, figuring out how each other worked. And we spent all day in a room, just the four of us, just cranking something out as fast as possible, which was a really great learning experience, and not something I've ever heard anyone else doing. It's the only thing I think it was similar to like a hackathon that I did at my last job. Like you spend, just 24 hours in the same room coming up with a project as quick as possible. And that was a really unique opportunity. And then after that day, we got to pick a project that we wanted to work on. So the instructors from the UX Bootcamp and the Development Bootcamp had a list of possible projects that were different problems that an app could be designed to solve for. And so we made our selection from there, and then we were assigned like a project manager as well, and that was one of the mentors from either of the courses. So some courses had a mentor that was from the UX side, and we had a mentor that was from the development side, to kind of help us in our project and give us a little bit more leadership as we were working through things. So I ended up with like a total team of 5, right? 4 students and one mentor. And we met every day for our project, kind of like you would in an ordinary like tech setting, right? With your like daily stand-up. So similar kind of setting, which was also really great. Got to learn a little bit about more agile project development, which is standard pretty much nowadays in the tech industry. And so really, got to practice some of that. And then we would work like for the first week, the UX team really kind of focused on things, and the developers just started doing some back-end research on what it would take. And then during that second week, we got them wireframes so that they could start story mapping. And we went through some exercises together to build out the user journey through the product, and really, yeah, worked together really close.
That's amazing. Do you want to share your screen and tell us about the problem that your group chose to solve, and kind of give us the elevator pitch of the project that y'all built together?
Yeah, of course. Here we go. Make it full screen. So this is the case study that I ended up writing for this project. And actually, like, really cool little note about this case study. And I know my other UX designer partner on this project had this happen too. It got picked up by like another publication on Medium, which is really cool, which means that it like gets a lot of exposure and gets a lot of attention from people that I don't know. So
that's really cool.
It's really cool. Yeah, like people read it every day, and you can see where people have highlighted it. And yeah, it's garnered a lot of attention and helped me get my first job in UX.
Amazing. Okay, so this is a roommate sharing app.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of the, I'll jump into that. The problem that we were addressing was improving roommate communication. Really, how do you work closer and communicate better with people that you're living with? This is a little bit of the team. These are the people that I worked with. So Amani here was the other UX designer along with me, and then we worked with Greg and Andre from the iOS side.
Oh, cool. I was saying that it was a web development, that they were web development students, but they're actually iOS development students.
Yeah, they were iOS specific, and so we were building for like the App Store, the Apple App Store.
And is that something y'all learned at DevMountain, like to specifically design for iOS, or was this project the first kind of foray into designing for iOS specifically?
This was our first project of like actually doing that, but we had lots of lectures on it beforehand. We dug into both Apple's user interface guidelines, and then I can't think of the word now, like material design from Google as well.
Yeah.
We looked at both, and then this project was aimed at the App Store specifically.
Okay, cool.
So that heavily influenced our design, and then of course the actual development of the app to make this a native app. But we can look at these. These were the final screens that we came up with for the app that kind of come through. There's, I talked about, there's the home information that you can kind of share any information with your roommates. You have a list of tasks. You have a calendar view for sharing shared spaces in an efficient way. You have a shopping list so you never run out of toilet paper, and then a personal account, which is necessary for some like usability issues, but then also helpful in setting up the whole thing and doing the onboarding process. So that would be the final project.
Very cool.
Yeah, so Amani and I did a lot of research together. We started by listing out some of the assumptions we had about roommates, and then countering each of those with an anti-assumption. And this is a kind of exercise that we learned in Bootcamp, and I actually continue to use. Really great way to kind of get out of your head and not think of yourself as the user, but do the actual research to figure out what actual problems are, and see what actually needs to be done for your user. After that, we kind of, searched for some articles, getting some real data on things, what problems people were having. So one of the assumptions we had were that these people were going to be college students. Turns out that wasn't the actual truth. That, lots of people older than 22 are using this kind of living situation to offset financial burdens or for companionship, which comes with a lot of weird social things that you need to account for. And we also found some other products that were on the market, and that is like not surprising, right? But no one really had a complete solution, and we were trying to develop a complete solution for this. So we also went out and interviewed people, talked to some people on the phone. we sent out a survey on using the Google surveys, helped us pinpoint what kind of problems we wanted to solve. And then I also went out and interviewed an apartment of girls that I knew, and I knew that they got along well. I just went over to their apartment and just hung out with them for a little bit and asked them a ton of questions, had a ton of fun, took a lot of notes about how they manage their time and living together.
It's like so much of this is research.
Yeah.
This is before you've even started wireframing.
Started designing at this point. Like,
amazing.
Are
the iOS developers involved with this at this point, or is this your two UX designers doing all of this research?
UX designers.
Cool.
We did have the iOS guys help us come up with the survey a little bit about what we wanted to learn. And then to get it out there, we had them help us by sharing it to their social media accounts as well. That's kind of how we spread the word to get as much data as possible.
Cool.
And yeah, so we leveraged them there. And then we built a user persona. There's another thing that we learned at Bootcamp. Yeah, distilling all of that research that we had done, turning that into someone that we could relate to, an actual user, a person, set up a little bit about her. And then we went in and started to define what the product was actually going to be at this point. So this is where we like really started designing in a more like what you would think of when you think of designing. And this is our user story mapping. We did do this with the whole team. So the other UX designer and I led this exercise, but the iOS developers and our PM all helped us in completing the user story map so that we did it together and were able to solve problems before they arose, right? So in this time, we like started thinking through how you would how you would join at home and what way based on kind of the iOS side would be a good solution to do that, but would also be user-friendly, right? Kind of start addressing some of those issues up front. At this point, we realized we needed a second persona because we needed like administrator who could like set chores and tasks and things and like start like assigning them to other people and kind of like be the administrator of the home, but then she needed like people to assign it to and not be like assigning tasks to each other because that just sounds crazy. So for like cleanliness and usability of the app. So then we kind of broke that down into a sitemap with two different paths. So you can kind of see on here, the orange represents just a standard roommate user, and then the purple would represent like an administrator in the app who has a little bit more responsibility and some more things that she can do, but the view is pretty standard for both. So site mapped out, and then we started sketching out some ideas for what it would actually look like. So we got into wireframing. One of the techniques that we were taught in Bootcamp was this crazy 8 kind of idea where you spend just like a few seconds on each. So you come up with like 8 designs, like a minute and a half, just really quick, kind of start flushing ideas out there, start giving everything the overall look and tone that you want it to have. Start going through like how to solve specific issues inside the app.
Cool.
And then at this point, I turned to some more usability testing. And
this, you were having users actually test what you had, like the app that you had built?
Yeah, so they were like testing through. So the first test I had them do actually was a card sort to test out the information hierarchy of our app. So like the diff where we had placed everything inside the navigation, basically. Want to make sure that it made sense, that we were kind of agreeing with the users. And it's actually like a really interesting point right here where the users all put some, let's see, oh yeah, the like my account kind of information, like my profile information, users kept putting it with the like home information, which was another screen that we had that like displayed all the information about the place that they were living. And so I built a prototype where we had that my account information in with the home information. But like when I like actually tested with a prototype, no one could find where the my account information was. And so I ended up pulling it back out and having it live in its own section of the navigation to make it easier for users to find. And yeah, it was a really great way to kind of double check what we had done and validate that things were where they should be. And then
having users test your actual product during a bootcamp project is like such a luxury. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great. And it was, I mean, it was mostly like other students in the class or friends, neighbors, you know, but trying to just, get things in front of actual people and have someone interact with it. And that wasn't me, right?
Cool.
Just, get it out of my head a little bit, remind myself that I'm not the user is important. And we didn't have a lot of time, but it was I think it's.
How much time did you have from start to finish?
It was a 3-week project. And we had to be done, but like we had to allow time for the iOS developers to do their part. So we basically had to be done with all of the like UX design portion within 2 weeks. So that we could like just kind of support the developers in the last week.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I see this visual design, the kind of color palette below. Is that something that y'all covered at DevMountain? Were you covering typography and color theory and like that?
Definitely. We spent a good chunk of time on the actual visual. The way that DevMountain structures the bootcamp is that kind of comes a little bit later in the bootcamp. It came before this project, but like it comes after we did all the like the research and that kind of stuff first. So I'll say we talked about it a lot. It's not the main focus of the UX design bootcamp, but it does play a critical part.
Cool.
And so we actually transitioned over to Adobe XD at this point. Basically just Imani and I wanted to teach ourselves how to use it to kind of see what it could do. Adobe XD isn't something that DevMountain currently teaches in their bootcamp. They focus on Sketch, but we had a guest lecturer who had introduced it to us, and we thought, why not give it a shot?
Cool.
See how it does. And so we imported our designs over to XD, and then came up with a color palette for our product. Came up with some typeface, and then I pulled some icons and then also like supplemented icons with ones that I drew in Adobe Illustrator. And then also kind of worked on a little bit of branding, which is not a typical kind of UX thing. But for this project, we needed, some sort of brand, some sort of logo. And so we worked together on that and did research on, branding a little bit. And logo design is something that is taught in the boot camp as well. Mm-hmm. I would say,
but it's not like necessarily the job of the UX designer to be.
Not a huge focus, but I think sometimes, especially in like a smaller startup, when people wear a lot of different hats, if you're a UX designer, you are often called upon to do things like a logo or a brand, and and support in those kinds of roles as well.
Yeah.
So
cool. This is such a thorough walkthrough. I'm kind of curious, what inspired you to go back and kind of do this this blog post and actually reflect on the projects that you had done? Because I think that's such a I mean, a great thing to do and something that you can like show employers and things like that. And I always love it when people, you know, blog as they're going through their bootcamp experience. But what inspired you to be so reflective and
Yeah, it was actually initially a requirement from DevMountain in the US Bootcamp. Like if you wanted to, they call it badging at the end, which is basically like fully graduate, right? At the end of the course is you have to have 2 case studies in your portfolio. And so we did one for our first project and then had this one for our second project. Actually, I agree, like it's a really good practice to be in. And you can see like, yeah, well-written UX case study can get you a lot of attention right out of boot camp. And so I think it's something to really focus on. And I think any position that you're in, any project that you do, it's important to spend some time reflecting. And so this is something that I did with my last job as well. That, yeah, really helped me get the job I have now. To highlight in your portfolio how you think, because that's really what people that are hiring for UX designers care about. It's one thing to be able to like show that you can like use Illustrator or Sketch or something, but it takes a really unique kind of thinking, and we want people that are looking for UX designers are looking for people with design thinking capabilities and really critical thinking skills. And so writing about your UX projects really shows off how you think and what kind of person you are, what kind of designer you are, and how you tackle problems. And so, yeah, it started out as a requirement, but it's something that I continue to do, and yeah, is well worth it.
That is great advice. Wonderful. Well, congratulations on building this. What a cool thing to build in like 3 weeks.
It was fast. It was really fast.
Amazing. Okay, cool. And then you mentioned, well, you can stop sharing your screen if you want to. So you mentioned before that this was something that you could like put in your portfolio or like be able to talk about in job interviews. So do you want to tell us about about what you're up to now and your job today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually I'm starting soon my second product designer position. Right out of boot camp, I took an internship at Progressive Leasing, which is in Draper, Utah, so really close to where I did the boot camp. Really great organization, and like I'll say, like I loved doing an internship. It was definitely the best way for me to like jump back into a career, and I had the proper like mentorship and support that I needed to kind of get on my feet and figure out what I was doing as a UX designer a little bit, right? And so I worked there for a few months, and then I moved out to Chicago, and recently got hired on at a small startup called Packback, which is an e-learning tech software, and actually start in a couple of weeks. Which
Congratulations.
Like a little bit of thank you so much. I actually like really excited about it. I had lunch with the team today to kind of just get to know them before I start working. And it is a really exciting opportunity. I'm going to be just the second person to join in product right now. The only person designing their product is the founder and chief product officer. And so a really great opportunity to jump in and like really have some leadership, but then like a lot of direction and say in what the product is actually going to be. And just,
And how did you land the internship? Was that through, like, did DevMountain do kind of like a job prep part of the curriculum? And like, did they introduce you to companies like Progressive, or did you do that kind of on your own?
I would say it was definitely a mix of both. DevMountain does a lot of job prep in terms of like helping you build a resume. And like I said, like the portfolio piece that I showed you just now, like making sure you have those before you leave so that you're ready to go and start job hunting. We also did lots of work with LinkedIn, LinkedIn profiles. They set up headshots, get everything ready. And then they kind of, started introducing us to people that were in the industry. We had guest lectures once a week for the last like month and a half of our boot camp, where there were, people in the industry, people that we could connect to. And they also really, introduced us to like going to UX meetups, which is really critical. And so like I joined Product Hive and I was on the Product Hive Slack channel, and had gone to a few meetups, and I had applied for the job at Progressive Leasing. It actually was, I applied for a senior UX designer position because I was just putting my resume as many places as I could. But the UX product manager over there, CJ, saw my resume and saw that article that I just showed you and reached out to me on the Product Hive Slack channel and just like, hey, this job is for a senior designer and you're obviously not quite there yet, but we have an intern position that we haven't posted yet that we'd love to bring you in for an interview for. And so, he reached out to me and I went in for an interview, and it was, really straight shot out of boot camp, and started working about a month after my boot camp ended.
Amazing. Do you, in your kind of like professional life as a product designer or UX designer, are you working with developers in the same way that you did that project with the iOS developers at DevMountain? Like, is that a skill that you are taking into your actual professional career now?
Yeah, definitely. It's very similar in the ways that you work together. I would say like in an actual work environment, because you're not dedicating as much time to like school, like you spend even more time with developers. But in both jobs, in my internship and then in this next job, you sit with developers, you interact on a daily basis, you have your stand-ups every day, you talk about what's going on, and there's constant communication, and that's really key for getting a product out that is cohesive and works.
Amazing. So between, you learned Sketch, I'm trying to think of the tools that you learned at DevMountain. So Sketch, InDesign, and then you said you and one of your teammates decided to learn Adobe XD?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Are those pretty much the tools that you need to know to get a job as a UX designer or a product designer, or have you found that you needed to like learn other things or keep learning after you graduated in order to get your job now?
I would say like the tool that is used most broadly is Sketch. Everywhere that I have either interviewed at or worked at, that has been the main tool for design. A lot of companies also use InVision, which we learned at Bootcamp, and I continue to use. And then there's like some other kind of support programs, but I would say like Sketch and InVision have been the main two that I've really needed in my career so far. And then a little bit of some other tools, but really I think all the software that I learned at DevMountain prepared me for what I needed, and I haven't had to spend any major amount of time learning a new tool.
Cool. And then now just looking back at your experience at DevMountain and the internship and now landing this full-time job, any advice that you have for folks making a career change through a UX bootcamp? Anything you would tell a friend? Anything you would have done differently looking back?
I think the only thing I can really say, I really doing a boot camp was definitely the right choice for me, and it has changed my life. I wouldn't have gotten a job where like in Chicago in less than a month, like without boot camp. And that is like really incredible to me. And especially like, yeah, like if you're thinking about change, like you want a career change, like no matter what that's for, whether that's for like your own personal development, which I know I found, or a raise in salary, which I definitely found, like, or just finding something you're passionate about. I would say like, if you're seriously considering it, do it. But also if like you get out what you put into it. Just like any type of education or job or anything that you're going to do in life, like if this is something you want to do, like make your time there worth it. It like 3 months sounds like it could be a long time. It flies by. But if you put the work in and like really like develop those relationships with your other classmates and your instructors and like dedicate yourself to it for 3 months, you're going to get a lot out of it, like more than you thought that you would.
Amazing. Well, that is fantastic advice. And your advice about blogging and writing out your process and doing that kind of like debrief after you finish your project, I think is fantastic advice. I hope everyone was listening. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience and your project, Katie.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, good luck at Packback, starting soon. And yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, thank you so much.